Hello YouTube, I'm Carlfire, and beneath me is a passive mob farm which works in 1.16. That might not sound like a whole lot. Passive mob farms have been in the game for a while. Nembomb's Meat Market has been the undisputed king of these, but 1.16 completely breaks it. So this, as far as I can tell, is just about the most efficient farm that I could make, or at least the most efficient module for a farm. You could make this bigger. You could tile it. Infinitely this way, and you could simply make another version of it this way if you had the right conditions. This is in my survival world, my personal survival world here, and I'm really proud of this. It took a long time to get this to work. So before I go over this farm, I want to talk to you about why Nembomb's design is broken, because I was gutted. I built it in survival. It was originally in this giant pit, and it worked for about a day before I realized it would break in 1.16. So let me just jump over into the latest snapshot, and then we'll come back. This is Nembomb's Meat Market. This has been pretty much the undisputed king of passive mob farms for years. Passive mob farming hasn't changed a whole lot, and this is a really great farm. It's right down low at the bottom of the world with all of these modules here. There's a lot of spawning spaces because passive mob farming is just so slow, and it uses dispensers with water buckets to flush water into portals, or, as it's on right now, into a flame here that will cook the meat and then bring it to a central storage system, which he has over here. This is his download from his video that I'm here, and I've downloaded it here so that I can show you the problem with this farm that completely breaks this concept in 1.16. So you can already see this. I've just updated, and already grass is appearing on these platforms. I'm in 20W21A. This was added in a previous snapshot, and this is an intended feature. Grass has not been dying under water like it's kind of supposed to. It used to be, I believe, that it only did it at night. Now, it can be full daylight. You can have a block giving off light directly next to it or directly above it, and it will still destroy a block directly next to it. So light does not play any role, basically. You can't light this up in such a way that it will save your grass. Now, you might think that this is okay because the grass will spread and it will regen, but it's much slower than the damage it's taking from the water. So I actually built one of these in my survival world after a long time of prepping, and left it overnight, and I got like 3 spawn packs maybe of mobs, and then nothing because this all turned to dirt. Which of course isn't going to spawn any mobs whatsoever. And you need to flush this fast enough because you need to get mobs that spawn out of the loaded chunks into the nether or dead as quickly as possible, because passive mob spawning is so incredibly slow. You need to take advantage of every single spawn that you get. So you could time this possibly to allow for the grass to regen, but that basically fundamentally breaks the entire concept of the farm itself. So unfortunately, flushing water streams is dead for this idea, which completely breaks this farm, which really really sucks, because this, oh yeah, so here you can see, right, like there's some ones there. This one hasn't died yet, but eventually it will. You can't light this up. It will not work. So I've discovered this 2 days after building it completely in my survival world. So I went over to a creative test world to figure out some solutions. So let me show you the solution that I have found. This is the final version of it that I did actually most of my testing for in survival after building it here, because I wanted to test it in both versions and simply to modify what I already had. Now this version of my farm is 20 blocks wide. That allows for 2 of these flying machines to exist side by side. And then it's actually 23 blocks along this axis here that I'm walking along right now. Now, optimal is 22, I believe, when I did my initial calculations. However, in this particular world, placing the bottom block for these portals here turned out to be a real pain, and making it 23 blocks simply meant that I only had to break 1 block of bedrock to put this portal in here, which was pretty great. So yes, this did require breaking bedrock to build 2 blocks, 1 for each portal. But ultimately it wasn't so bad. This is 1 block above bedrock, and then we have some space on the outside here that allows for some pack spawning to happen to allow more mobs to actually spawn on the grass in our farms. We have a row of glowstone here going along the edge, and then I used leaves here because they don't block passive mob spawning and they don't stick to sticky pistons. And then up here, we also have end rods going across here, and that is to light up the grass at night. You could use glowstone or sea lanterns, but I just use these because it allows me to see what's going on in the farm a lot easier from above. Every single one of these blocks here needs to be a light source, and it's right in the middle of these little cutouts here. These cutouts are 2 wide, and they alternate on the other side. They're 5 across, just like these flying machines. You need these because when the flying machines come back, they're going to deposit chickens along this block here, not into the portal, and you need them to be pushed into the portal right away because you want them to stop using up your mob cap. So here a chicken would go in there and then immediately be pushed into the portal by the flowing water here. There's also another peculiarity with this farm, that this is a honey block here, and that is because it's possible for these machines to jam, and I have a clip showing you that happening. Basically, it happens when you unload chunks, go to the nether, fly away. This can break. Here's a perfect example of one of the flaws with this farm. Because it uses flying machines, if you go to the nether, if you fly away at just the right time, it will break. And this is the reason why this arm here is made of honey blocks, so that these don't stick together when you fix this farm, because fixing it is easy. You can just do it. I like to do buttons because they just fix themselves, but you just come here like that, away you go. Like that. Just crawl under you. See, and then that one will go. That one's going to go as well. And they don't catch each other when they're fixed. Now you can put in timing so that this only runs when you're here. I'm not terribly interested in that. You'll see this even fixes itself with terms of them going synchronized. So that one goes there because it's only bouncing on one side. So now this is back up and running. Because this doesn't happen all that often, and frankly, it's pretty easy to fix. So if you leave it running and there's slime blocks on both these, then unfortunately you need to basically break it and rebuild it. Whereas if you use honey blocks, you can basically just use a slight modification to get it to work again. Alternatively, you can flick a lever like this. This will stop both the machines along this axis here, and it will basically make this a little bit easier. Here's some chickens right over there. That one just went in right away. Yeah, thank you. So then you could just turn this on when you're actually at the farm and using it, and you could use slime blocks there. Honey blocks do kind of have a little bit of an issue sometimes, so I'd prefer not to do it. The other thing we had to do was use a piston facing down. This is a regular piston, and I needed to flip the way that this observer is facing. You can see that, and then the delay on this side here is slightly longer. It's on 3 ticks. That one is on 2, or it's on the 3rd slot. That's on 2. And the observer is in a slightly different place on this side. That one, it's right up against the obsidian there. Then you just bring that up here through a repeater. That's important to get the timings right and send them back and forth. The other ones are going into a trap door. And that's the farm. It just goes back and forth and gets you lots and lots of mobs. This is actually the exact same amount of spawning spaces as Nembomb's meat market, and it did occur to me that the version of the meat market that I showed you is not the most efficient. He did later on end up removing all of the multiple floors from that design because it actually made it faster in later versions. So this is slightly less efficient because we don't get as many mob spawning from outside the farm and trying to spawn outside the farm and then spawning inside because of pack spawning. So it's slightly less efficient than two of those updated meat markets, which is what I had in this pit originally. But it is the best that I could make it, seeing as though they don't work at all in the latest versions. So yeah, this is the design. Let me sleep because I don't want to do a video in the rain. Now, location is really important for this farm here. We want passive mobs to spawn in the farm. It's the whole point of it, and they won't spawn in oceans, which makes the obvious solution to getting rid of grass in your render distance pretty obsolete. So basically, you need to find a plains biome to build this in. And the best way to do that is to find an island that is mostly plains, and you're going to have to use F3 for this. Because it will tell you what biome you're in. This is plains. If I go over this way, I'm on a beach biome, even though I'm in the water. Now I'm in a deep ocean. So it doesn't matter what's actually there. You need to check exactly what biome you're in and mark that out. If it's grass, but it's still a beach, it won't spawn. And then you need to remove all of the grass that isn't in your farm and all of the sand that is in a beach biome, because turtles can spawn on that. And once turtles spawn, they'll go off into your ocean and make your life kind of difficult. This location is pretty perfect. I only had to remove grass on that island and this one. Then you need to blast down or dig a big hole and build this right at the bottom. You want to leave space on the sides here, and I'm still not done moving this wall back to allow for passive mobs to have some packs spawning from outside the farm. I believe 5 or 6 blocks is ultimately what you want on either side there, and then just dig that straight down as well. Location, like I said, is incredibly important. That island is actually, if I were to go over to that island, I believe, depending on the render distance that I'm playing with, I could get some mobs spawning over there and they would interfere. So render distance does make a difference. On a server, that's set by the server, but on single player here, I could set my render distance to 8 chunks, 4 chunks, and have this work, and have to do less clearing of grass and that sort of thing. Whereas if I were to up my render distance, I could actually probably load my base, which is over there, and that has some passive mobs in the area, stuff like that. So that's something to bear in mind as well. You can actually see this is pretty efficient for a passive mob farm. These guys are moving in pretty quickly. They're showing us a lot of cool things today. And they're right there. That's the one flaw that they can do that one. But for whatever reason, I've never seen them do it twice. So this little piggy is actually going to make it in there. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, the one place where these kind of overlap and intersect. And unfortunately, there's nothing really we can do about that. But that's why one of the reasons why we build this farm 22, or in this case 23 blocks along, is that there's enough time for them to get out of the passive mob cap, because I believe it's every 40 seconds that the mobs try and spawn. So that is the design here. Let me come down here and let's just pretend that we're a mob. So let's go in here and, oh, I'm a cow, and moo, I'm getting pushed along here. I'm going to go into the portal, and I'm using portals here simply because there's not enough space. Oh, right. I'm a player. I don't get pushed through instantly. But this does illustrate the point here. You would need to break a bunch of bedrock to, say, drop them into a fire to cook them, and then you need to get hoppers under there. It's much better to put them into the nether and do your killing in the nether, because once they're in the nether, you can kill them as slowly as you like. It doesn't matter. So yeah, here I've just dropped down here. I have several pistons which push the mobs down here to the central sorter. Up there we have boats that are full of chickens, actually, and so anything that spawns in the portal just gets knocked straight out. The extra space here is to allow for horses. If this was built in a forest biome, say, and the farm, and we were only getting like cows and stuff, it would be a lot smaller because the horses try and suffocate themselves in the portal. So that's why that's there. Also, this is all spawn proofed because we're now in the perimeter for my wither skeleton farm. So unfortunately, that was where I had to build this farm. And then this is just a sorter here that will sort all the mobs that are from one another. So I'm the only interesting mobs for me are pink sheep and horses. They're the only ones I want to keep. Everything else can die on the magma blocks. So the horses get knocked up actually over this block because they automatically go up blocks. They get knocked over here eventually. A couple of them might stick around on here, but they'll fall down here. Those fence gates can be locked, and then I can ride them out there. So basically, I can sort for horses here and keep them alive if I want. Cows drop through these trapdoors, and they just die. You know, they can die. I don't care about them. Oh, let me get out of here. Come on. I'm not wearing Frostwalker. Okay. And then the sheep actually get pushed over here, and you can put some blocks down where these buttons are and sort for pink sheep. This is just my setup here. Basically, just kill them. Put them on magma blocks, put them on wither roses, put them on burning netherrack with a hopper minecart underneath of it. And so here you can see I'm getting plenty of oh, another pink sheep has died in my farm of loot. And really the only loot that I go after is the raw beef and or the raw materials here, because you can trade mutton, chicken, pork, and beef to butchers, and you can get a stack of emeralds from one trade before they refresh, which is kind of the whole point of this farm, other than getting pink sheep and these guys. The pink sheep was the whole point of building this thing, because I couldn't find one in my world, and I wanted one for my zoo in the end, where Endermen are abducting mobs from the overworld and bringing them back to the main end island. And I wanted them to have found a pink sheep, so I had to do a lot of work for this to work. Oh, coarse dirt. Yeah, I threw that in there by accident. These eggs are not coming from the farm itself. They're actually coming from the chickens up in the portal that are knocking everything else out. So you could use maybe endermites or really anything just that's easy to spawn in there. Or, you know, you could just sort these out, put them into a automatic sorter, and get even more chicken from this farm. But this here isn't really the point. If people are interested, I may do a video on this sorter as well, because it's kind of hard and tricky to sort mobs in the nether. It's really easy to sort them with water, but in the nether it's hard. And you can't bring them back into the overworld to sort them because, well, then you'd be using up your passive mob cap. The other thing of note here is that when you're setting up your portals, I'm falling down here, this portal here needs to be lower than the portal that the player goes through, because otherwise the mobs are going to try and find the lowest portal to go through. So let me go through here, and I'll just show you that this actually links up to, yeah, this portal over here, which is right up here above my my mob farm as well. So here I can actually get back and forth, and the mobs will go through that portal. If a mob was to go back through the portal that they go through, they actually come up here, because that's just the way the heights work out. It's time to talk about the elephant in the room and the reason why this mob farm doesn't work in most worlds, and that is your spawn chunks. You cannot have any passive mobs in your spawn chunks at all, or the farm won't work. I mean, you can have one, but you can if you have. I think the mob cap is like 10. So yeah, you can't have any grass here either because they spawn on grass. And if you come to your spawn chunks, you know, every 40 seconds, it's going to try and spawn in some mobs, and they'll stay here. They're loaded all the time, which is why this iron farm works all the time, which is great. But if I went to my passive mob farm, then they would still be loaded and no one would spawn there. No matter how low I built it, no matter how efficient I made it, nothing would spawn in it. So that's a bit of a problem. Now, you might be looking at this and thinking, I can't do this in my world. I'm not going to do this. And that's a really reasonable thing to want to do. But you don't need to do this level of commitment if you have the right seed. Survival Island seed doesn't have any grass, right? You have a little spawn island maybe in the middle that you can remove the grass and the sand from the beach, and you're done. That's it. As long as there's no grass in a 23 by 23 radius around the central chunk. Now, you might not spawn there, so there's plenty of tutorials on finding your spawn chunks. But as long as there's no grass in your spawn chunks, and you kill every single mob in it, then you're good. Now, I had to put up fences around here to stop mobs from wandering in. There's a sheep here who's a perfect example of why you need to do that, because he's trying to get in, right? So if he wandered in, he could spawn outside and wander in, then he'd count to the mob cap, right? So if this was all water, though, you couldn't do that. So if you're starting a new world in 1.16, you want the new nether features or something like that, and you just want to start a new world, it's worth considering whether or not you want to build a passive mob farm. They're really cool. You get lots of emeralds from them. You get lots of free food and pink sheep and stuff like that. It's kind of a neat thing to have. So think about that. You don't need to use a survival island seed. You can build this in your old world. I actually chose this world deliberately to build a passive mob farm in, ironically, because I started this world years ago. And in older versions, if you wanted to build a squid farm, you couldn't have water in your spawn chunks at all, because squid didn't despawn. So they would, they would clog up your mob cap in your spawn chunks and stay there permanently. And you couldn't build one if there was water anywhere in your spawn chunks. And they could spawn in one block of water, like they could spawn in the corners of here. So I had initially decided that I was going to build a squid farm and a passive mob farm in my world. So I decided it was easier simply to remove a giant amount of grass than to, say, drain an ocean, which obviously is completely unmanageable. Can you imagine trying to drain an ocean this big? I've done it for Guardian Farm. I'm not doing it for spawn chunks, right? So I deliberately chose one that had as little water as possible, and then went through with a shovel and made path blocks. You could remove the grass entirely. You could do whatever you wanted. If you spawn in a desert, you could just strip mine all the sand off the top, because rabbits spawn on sand in deserts. If you have a mushroom island, you need to remove the mycelium. I don't know what spawn would have a mushroom island, but basically you can't have any spawnable blocks in your mob farm. So that's grass, mycelium, sand on beaches, and maybe podzol. I'm not sure. In certain biomes, I'm not sure about that. But yeah, you don't need to do all this work if you choose your seed carefully. Just as long as there's no passive mobs here in your farm. There's one other thing I want to mention. There used to be a way, I don't believe it works anymore. I was never a fan of it to begin with, of removing mobs from your spawn chunks without removing grass, and that was to simply put a bunch of passive mobs in cages along the corner fences. And what that would do is it would load them and not allow anything to spawn in here. So if you went and killed everything in here, you still have grass. When you came through your portal into your spawn chunks or whatever, you would load the mobs on the outside and nothing would spawn. But I don't believe that ever worked to satisfaction, and it certainly doesn't now that the spawn chunks are 23 by 23, because most people's render distance is something like 16. So if you went to the center of your spawn chunks, you would unload all those mobs and turn this entire area back into a passive mob farm. A couple of chickens would spawn somewhere and you'd have to go find them and kill them, and it would just basically mean that you could never go to your spawn chunks. So the only way to do this properly, unfortunately, is to remove grass or choose your seed properly and just with a little bit of care. So thank you so much for watching this video and for checking out this design. I'm really excited to see if anyone can come up with anything that's more efficient. This was sort of the only thing that I could think of, but I'm sure that there are some people out there who can probably improve on this sort of concept. And maybe in the future we'll get our fleshing machines back, but I doubt it. Mojang seems to have made that an intended feature, so this is the way to do it now, I believe. So I'm Coralfire, I'm signing off. Next to Victoria, my naturally spawned pink sheep. Finally found one in my world, and that's it for today, folks. I will see you next time. Bye.